I'm on. Hello, everyone. It's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. So, guys, I have with me the awesome Lee Camp from Redacted tonight. Let's not do that. Yeah, I have the awesome Lee Camp. Let's try that one more time. I have the awesome Lee Camp from Redacted tonight with me tonight. Lee, please tell everyone hi.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate you coming on. Just so we're clear, you're not a Russian bot, nor have you ever been a Russian bot. I'm required to ask that question.
Well, I'm an American in America covering American news, but actually no one asked me whether I'm a bot. I am actually a bot, but I'm an American-born bot.
Well, I think they're accusing everything of being from bots now. I mean, an environmental movement, bots. Bernie Sanders supporters being pissed off, bots. Black Lives Matter, but
a great BuzzFeed article just came out that even though I think a lot of the article buys into a lot of the bullshit of Russiagate, it totally debunks the bot thing. So even people believing some of this Russiagate crap are like, yeah, but the bot thing there's no evidence of it. There's no proof. When everyone says, oh, it's Russian bots, it turns out that it's, a right-wing think tank has created this bot analysis that's just utter crap.
I'm amazed by this. I have to be honest. This is kind of one of the reasons I wanted you on the show. It's one thing for me looking at this from the outside where I see this and I say to myself, okay, this is absolutely insane. I feel like I'm pulling my hair out because it feels like a failure of seriousness. Like if it's one thing if you say, I watched Bernie Sanders. I had the indignity of watching Bernie Sanders make this argument about how shaming himself in front of Chuck Todd, Mr. Oblivious, shaming himself completely, throwing everybody under the bus. Oh, my supporters were pissed off because they were pushed by Russians and this and that. It's a failure of seriousness to believe that any of this stuff would have had an impact on the election, even if they believe it's true. It's like, even if all of this stuff is true, do you honestly believe it had an effect on the election?
Yeah, I mean, that's something I came back to recently when I covered it, was even if you wanted to believe that this clickbait farm, which, by the way, even the indictment doesn't say had any connection to the Russian government, but let's say it did. Let's say the Russian government told some click farm interns to post. If you look at some of the memes they posted, some are puppy memes, some's Bernie Sanders in a G-string. Like, it doesn't even seem to make any sense. But let's assume that's true. This is like, to me, it's like the idea that had an impact on the election is like saying that a gnat splatting on the windshield of a NASCAR made the car lose the race. Like, it's totally ridiculous. And actually on this week's Redacted Tonight, which will air in about an hour and a half, I cover it. Most of it's not about Russiagate. Most of it's about everything that went wrong in the 2016 election, the primary and the general. Everything from interstate cross-check to rigging the primaries to polling places, voter suppression. I just go down the line, the super delegate crap, all that stuff. Have we changed any of it? No. We have not done a goddamn thing to fix our election system, but we're spending all day, every day going, it's the great other. It's the other bad guys that have done this to us, and it's laughable. It's WMD all over again.
It is insane. I'm blown away by this because I feel like it's like this is a certain level of insanity to believe that Russian Facebook ads or ads that was on Twitter and Facebook ads. And I always have to keep saying ads because it sounds ridiculous when you say Twitter ads or Facebook ads. But compared to all of the money that was $1 billion and they're making this with a straight face. Now, part of the reason they're doing this is because they're,
I want to just add some numbers to what you just said. $6,700 is what Facebook came up with was spent by that troll farm before the election. $6,700. It is nothing compared to what was spent on our election. And Facebook, the VP of Facebook ads has tweeted out that he's seen the evidence and none of it was like trying to change the election. It had no impact on the election. And he, this is the VP of Facebook ads said, I don't understand why our media is not talking about the fact that this had no impact on the election, and 56% of these ads were after the election. of the ones that actually were before, something like 25% of those were actually what was seen by people, because the others weren't even seen by anyone. It's, again, laughable.
That's amazing. That's amazing. But, you know, it's like a drowning man reaching for a pillar. It's like anything they can get their hands on when they're drowning. Some of these people have no paradigm to understand the world of why Hillary Clinton could lose to reality show hosts. And when you have those, think of, you know, Huffington Post had Hillary Clinton winning about 98% on the day she lost that election. And you can imagine that people woke up that morning thinking that it was a lock and shattered, fell apart. Completely fell apart.
I mean, and you know, for people that really wanted Hillary or thought she was going to make a good president, I understand why they're pissed, but they need to like look at what actually took place and why when you run a corrupt candidate that is taking money from every corporation and Goldman Sachs and Walmart, she was on the board of Walmart, you look at that and you wonder why she wasn't able to beat somebody who's, he's an outright liar, but I think a lot of America just fell for his con man routine. And it's like, but then you look at how they had to, I mean, the fact, this all ties in, the fact that they had to rig the primary in order to get her in that position to begin with meant her support wasn't there. The support wasn't there to get her over the hill. So it's like, if you had taken the candidate that actually had genuine support, then, you know, Bernie would have won. Now, of course, now I guess because he wants to keep the Democrats as friends or something, he's falling into this Russiagate bullshit. And by the way, I you know, some of your viewers might know what I do, some may not, but just to you know, get past what the questions I often face. It's like, yes, I have a comedy news show on RT America, but I'm an American in America covering American news. I've never been asked to say anything on that network. I've never been forced to say anything. I've never been censored. And on top of that, people aren't aware of the level of censorship that goes on all these other networks, on MSNBC and CNN. Melissa Harris Perry, once she was fired or forced out of MSNBC, said she was even censored from things as small as covering the Beyonce halftime show on the Super Bowl. She wasn't allowed to talk about that because it was Black Power inspired or Black Panther inspired, and therefore MSNBC refused to let her speak about it. It's like, that's the level of censorship these other networks are dealing with.
That's amazing. I wasn't going to ask those because I assumed that my audience knew that. Like I wasn't even gonna.
You got a smart audience. I
wasn't gonna hit you with the indignity of asking, hey, does Vladimir Putin put, you know, quarters in your G-string as you shows? Yeah, I wasn't gonna ask that. I am curious about something though. What is it like on the inside dealing with this? Like I said, it feels like to some degree, there are a few groups of lefties who are pushing back against this nonsense because we think it's ridiculous. We think it's a few things. It's obfuscates from the real reasons why that party has failed in a degree that party has failed. And it's their way of trying to run out the clock to get from point A to point B without having to deal with any issues affecting them. Meaning, we don't want to talk about us. We want to talk about him. And as long as we can make this campaign about him, we may not necessarily get a massive bang for our buck, but at the very least, we don't have to deal with any of those populist issues, and we can cast all this stuff as being Russian meddling and Russian bots. What is it like on the inside having to put up with this level of ridiculousness? And do you have run-ins with either other elements of the press or other elements of, I guess, more so establishment figures?
Well, I haven't any physical run-ins. No. Even though we're in DC, I haven't. Although I did see John Podesta on the Metro once, but no, I haven't had any like run-ins. And, you know, I try and stay out of the Twitter bickering. You know, there's a lot of infighting and stuff. And I try not to have purity tests for people, although people can obviously be wrong enough that I'm not going to like, you know, have exchanges with them. But I try not to be like, oh, this person, you know, was wrong on one issue, so therefore they're part of, they're an evil villain. So, you know, I feel like there's just not a lot of time for that shit. Like, we are watching the collapse of our, not just our country, but our environment, our, you know, planet as a whole. And so I kind of think, you know, I kind of try to put on the horse blinders and just remind myself, keep doing what we're doing and keep getting these issues out there. I have been attacked by NPR and New York Times and some other outlets. And you know, when it's a big outlet like that, and you know it's going to be on the top of people's Google searches when they search my name, I have put out responses to both NPR and New York Times, and both the responses went viral because it allowed people to have an internal view of the propaganda that these outlets are putting forward. I mean, you know, and you probably have some viewers who are into NPR, and I grew up on NPR, and I was a big fan of a lot of what they did, but around the time of Occupy, and you know, you probably also have some viewers who are like, I stopped listening to that crap in the 80s. So I get that I maybe was behind the times, but around the time of Occupy, I saw that NPR may be a nice, cuddly, so-called left-wing view of things, but it is still the, you know, pro-unfettered capitalism, pro-banks running our society. They basically never spoke about Occupy, and when they did, they would have a little panel about whether, you know, Occupy was just homeless people shitting in front of Wall Street or whatever. And, you know, it was like a ridiculous... anyway... You know, we're dealing with something very serious in that this is the corporate stranglehold of our system, and they've taken over the levers of the state, the moneyed interests, the Wall Street and the banks and the corporations have taken over the levers of the state. They've taken over the media. And so now you're seeing them try and pretend as if you get a choice, as if the Democrats and Republicans represent some sort of different choice. And the only way the Democrats can continue that, to act like there's something different, is to say, oh, the other side's rigged by Russia, because they can't. They've lost the ability to say, we stand for the people, we stand for the workers, we stand against corporations, we stand against the moneyed interests, we stand against dark money in our elections. They no longer can say any of that because none of that's true. So
that's true. Yeah.
All they have left is, well, it's Russians. That's all they have left.
Vladimir Putin, man. That goddamn Vladimir Putin. Like, yeah, I agree with you. I totally agree with you on this. It's a level of obfuscation that jumps the shark to such a magnificent degree. It's hard to believe that they have any level of legitimacy with this. And yet, again, you have a lot of cultists who are so wrapped into that, you know, they're wrapped into this idea of, oh my God, I can't believe this woman actually lost. He was cheated. The most qualified woman on the planet was cheated in this particular election process. They believe it. They're true believers.
I guess I mean qualified as a war criminal, qualified to sell arms to Saudi Arabia, qualified to push fracking. She proudly ran around the world selling fracking to the world. Like she is big oil and big banks incarnate. And I think that a lot more women should rule our world, but I don't think that should mean women that act exactly the same as the men. Like
as the men, yeah. Not using women as just kind of this line or this kind of demographic point that they use for identity reasons. Yeah, it should matter. I don't think. Yeah, I agree with you on this. I guess what I'm getting at is, what is it from a person standpoint, meaning you as a human being inside an organization that's being vilified in the way that it's being vilified. And maybe this question is a little weird, and maybe this question is a little touchy-feely. I'm also curious about the human element of this, dealing with this level of bullshittedness with what you guys are taking. I mean, you guys are taking a lot of flack for what I consider to be not necessarily all that real of a thing. It's almost like a McCarthyite smear campaign.
Yeah, that's one of the funniest things, is that we've been through all this before. You remember McCarthyism? I mean, I don't remember it, but I've seen videos, and you know, it used to be a thing that the liberals, so-called, would point to under like Bush and say, you don't want to go back to that, right? You don't want to be McCarthyist. And now those same people like Rachel Maddow are just doing it day in and day out, 24/7. But to get to your question, it is tough, but I don't think. I mean, I don't want to speak for the organization. I don't have, you know, much contact with the higher ups or anything, so I don't know what they're dealing with. You know, it could be a completely different situation for them. But for me and my show, I mean, it does kind of suck, but I also understand that dissent in any society, especially a society that has been kind of like the venues for the avenues for dissent have been largely taken over. The avenues for media have largely been taken over by the corporatocracy, for lack of a better word. So in a society like that, there's not gonna be an easy road. No one's gonna, like, power seeds nothing, and it's not going to sit there and be like, oh, you're proposing that we are killing the planet and that we are driving all of us to extinction, and that's what you have to say, and you want to change the way our system is so that we could have a sustainable system in which we all prosper and are not oppressed and miserable and slaving at jobs we don't have to do. So you want to say that? Here's a pedestal. We're going to put you up and just let everybody hear that message. I mean, that's not how it works. And I get that's not how it works. And so, yeah, sure, there's days where I can feel, defeatist about, well, why is everybody, not paying attention to the things I'm saying, the issues I'm saying, or the fact that almost everything I cover, I'm quoting from all these other sources. It's not just me. I'm not just, saying, I'm not like a Alex Jones figure that just waves papers and says, I have papers you've never seen. I show the sources. So, but, there's days you can be defeatist about that stuff. But I also understand that we could lose. And by we, I mean people that want a sustainable world and a more egalitarian world. We could lose, but I'd rather go down swinging, and I'm just going to keep doing that. So.
That's my logic. I look at this from a Jack Fresco way. This idea that society itself creates the human beings in that society. And it gives you this kind of weird scenario of, if that's true, which I think it is, if you grew up on Vulcan, you'd act like a Vulcan. If you grew up in ancient Japan, you'd act like you're somebody who grew up in ancient Japan, a samurai or something. Well, that puts us in this weird situation of if your society is arranged in a way that has incentives that drives the behavior of this current society, and this current society is somewhat of a death cult. How do you pull out of that death spiral? And so the defeatist thing happens, but again, there's nothing else to do but to do something, even if that something is somewhat futile effort. So I agree with you on that. I totally agree with you on this. Last question. Of all the stories that you've covered, because Redacted tonight covers a lot of stories, what has been the one that has stood out the most to you, and purely just to you? It doesn't necessarily have to be the most grandest or epic story, just one that you yourself resonated with more so in a way that I guess maybe not necessarily the other ones hit.
Thanks. I appreciate the question. I think I can come at it from different angles. I think there's the one perhaps that I'm maybe most known for, which was covering the election fraud for people that followed the whole redacted path that we've gone over the 4 years. Part of it was that was a story that was getting covered almost nowhere else. There was very little, certainly not on television, and putting together all those pieces, saying, if you look here, if you look at Greg Palast reporting, if you look at what's happening here, if you look at the fact that and a lot of this that I was screaming about during the election, you now are seeing it in court. Like, you're seeing the New York Board of Elections had to plead guilty to purging 100,000 likely Bernie voters in New York alone. That's 100,000 people just in Brooklyn. My hair's on fire during the election, and other networks, MSNBC, CNN, Fox News, none of them mention it because they have to pretend our election is legitimate. My hair's on fire, and then you see that's happening. And that's why I, again, even though I haven't been covering it much recently because we're not in an election season technically, I did say, okay, for the upcoming tonight on Redacted, I talk about on the upcoming 2018 midterms, have we fixed any of this stuff? And the answer really is no. I mean, you can point to a little pinprick here or pinprick there. The DNC says they're going to get rid of or recommended getting rid of 60% of superdelegates. However, A, that hasn't happened yet. They may still dilute that. And B, even if they were to do that, we have internal emails that WikiLeaks released showing that they view getting rid of 60% of superdelegates as like a little bone they throw because they still have a rigged primary. They still have 40% of superdelegates. They still have all the other ways they rig these things. So, we still vote on black box machines that you can never see the code of. And in fact, that's gotten even worse because the Department of Homeland Security recently designated our voting system critical infrastructure, which means they now basically own it and can decide what's done with it. So anyway, that's a very important story, I feel like, in what things I've covered. Another one that I've covered a few times and continue to stay on it, and it's connected to climate change. I mean, I think climate change is so important because even now that our mainstream media has admitted it's a thing, they still, when you look at the numbers, are basically ignoring it. Like, you know, a year ago, Meet the Press mentioned climate change 0 times the entirety of the year. And those are the so-called left-wing media, which they're not really left-wing, but you know what I'm saying. And they're not talking about it. So they've admitted it's real. They're just not going to talk about it. But to get a little more specific, animal agriculture is something I've covered. You know, I've probably done, 5 extensive segments on it or something. But more climate change is caused by animal agriculture than cars in our society. We really are eating ourselves to death. I mean, and this isn't like, I don't eat meat, but I'm not even saying don't eat meat. I'm saying we've got to do away with factory farming. We've got to decrease our meat consumption significantly if we ever want this planet to last. It's like, if you look at the numbers, it's laughable that we could ever continue at this rate. They've done studies where if you accounted for everything it does to the planet, taking care of the cow, all the water the cow drinks, all that stuff, all the shit you have to deal with, like literal shit.
Literally.
The cost of a McDonald's hamburger should be $200. $200 if you would actually account for what we're doing to society and everything. But instead it's $1 and we're just going to kill ourselves. That's even taking out of the equation how horrific it is to the animals. Like, even if you ignore that, they're going to get their revenge because we're going to die. Like, no.
If you ignore the torture. I've made this argument before that it's this weird societal thing. It's almost like a societal commentary. You can have the nicest person on the planet, and that nicest person on the planet is eating a hamburger that, for the most part, was abused by some kind of, animal ag industry that is going to give them cancer if they do it over a long period of time, that pays that worker, just dick and piss in regards to the salary. It's like all of these things that they've externalized on the society itself in order to get that hamburger. I agree with you. I agree with you like nobody's business.
Another amazing example, which I feel like really kicks it home to people, is in North Carolina, the government there of North Carolina vetoed a bill that would not allow the pig farmers there to continue spraying their pig shit onto neighbors that live nearby. And they vetoed it to make sure these farms still get to continue laminating North Carolina in pig shit. Because basically there are so many pigs, we're talking millions of hogs, millions, that it's lagoons of shit. And so what they do with that, because they can't store it anywhere, it's too much, and it just destroys the land, is they spray it into the air over fields that wafts over nearby towns and just coats everything. And here's the real kicker, is who benefits the most from this whole situation? China. China owns most of the hogs in North Carolina. So China has bought up our hogs and is spraying us with shit. And North Carolina, the government there is so owned by corporate interests that they're like, yeah, let's continue to do this. This is delightful.
That's so sad. There's Al Franken. Al Franken is on the outs right now for touching women inappropriately. But in that book where he was going after, if I'm not mistaken, lies and lying liars that tell them, something to that effect, he mentions that too, where he talks about this idea that they don't have anything to do with the shit itself. Like, you have all these rivers of shit that they don't have anything to do with. Oh, that's so gross. That's so gross. That is disturbingly gross. All right, so I'm going to end it here. Look, man, I really appreciate you coming on to the show. Thank you very much.
Hey, such a pleasure. If anybody wants to check out my show, it's leecamp.com. I also have a podcast called Moment of Clarity. And if you're ever in DC, this goes for both you and your viewers. I'd love to hang out and get a beer with everybody. We tape our show for free every Thursday night. So right here in DC. So people just got to look me up and email me. And we grab a beer after the show and have a good time. So every Thursday night.
Very cool, man. Very cool. And I'll put your show and information at the bottom. I think most people know you are, but I'm still going to put all the information at the bottom so people can contact you whenever they want. This is Lee Camp from Redacted tonight. Guys, I'm going to end this. I want to thank everybody for showing up. You guys have a good one. If you enjoy the content, feel free to share, like, subscribe, but of course, you can always support through Patreon. Thanks, guys.